Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I am joined here by a very special guest. She's been an occupational therapist since 2000. She's a certified yoga instructor. She's a meditation teacher. She's Reiki attuned, and she's even done some work on shamanistic healing modalities, which involves spirit guides and reaching out and becoming aware of your higher self. It's my honor to introduce Elizabeth Scarborough. Thank you so much for hopping on this podcast.
My pleasure.
Now, I am actually very excited to have this podcast episode because the memories that I initially had with you during our seminars, I think you can't judge a book by its cover. And I definitely did that when we first met. I think we were taking MFR 3 together, and you do a great job of orchestrating groups, and so I think you guys had rented out a house and you had invited me and said, "Hey, Unu, if you'd like to join and, stay at this house during MFR 3, we'd love to have you." And I was like, I don't know who you are, a little put off. And I ended up not staying there. But after meeting you and everybody else, I ended up spending a lot of time at that house anyway. So it's just funny how all that works out. So can you just kind of talk us through your MFR journey? Where were you at in your life when you found it? And how did you go about taking your first steps into myofascial release?
Okay. So I remember way back when I was in graduate school in Miami, I received one of John's flyers for an upcoming seminar series. And I wanted to go so badly. It rang my bell. It resonated with me. But I was like a starving grad school student. I had a 2-year-old. Like, I just couldn't afford to take the class, but somewhere it stuck in the back of my mind. And then fast forward many, many years to 2016. I've been an occupational therapist. I have a successful career. I've actually been promoted to rehab director, and I get another flyer in the mail. For one of John's classes, and I needed continuing education. So I remembered having received that, years prior, and I was like, this is fascinating. I'm so intrigued, but I'd never even Googled it. I didn't know anything more than what was on the actual flyer. So I signed up for MFR 1 just out of curiosity and to satisfy my continuing education requirements. And I remember sitting in that room. It was a DVD, MFR 1. And I remember sitting in that room. It was maybe at the end of the second day, and the lights were out, the video was playing. And I remember listening to John. And it was the first time in my life that I heard my spirit speak so clearly, so like just as clear as could be. This is it. This is it. And I sat there. I can actually get like emotional just even remembering it. I sat there in the dark, silent crying, because I knew, like, my spirit was like, this is it. This is you. This is what you've been looking for. This is what you've been seeking. Your thirst is finally going to be quenched. And I just like fully attended that class. I was into it. I felt the releases. I loved everything about it. And so that started me on my journey. Like, I couldn't take enough of his classes. And each class I took, I thought that was amazing. And then the first time I took a class that John was actually teaching, I was just like, I don't even think my feet like touched the ground. It was so cathartic. The work resonated so deeply with me on every level. And I decided, like, then I would kind of like step into the circle of fear, and I'd be like, but can I really make it as an MFR therapist? And again, I remember exactly where I was. I was just watching TV on a normal night, and I heard my spirit say to me again, quit your job. And I was like, what? Like, I have a really good job. I'm quite addicted to the paycheck. And I heard my spirit say, quit your job. And I did. And I started a private practice. And it has been amazing. Just learning to trust and be in the flow.
That can be so hard to do. On another reminder for myself to not judge a book by its cover. I remember wanting to learn myofascial release, and I had heard about it on a podcast. And I was like, I know that this is something I'm drawn to, but I don't know who to learn it from. And in this podcast episode, it's Phil Tavalashi sharing his MFR journey and talking about the John Barnes method. And so I remember looking it up, and I remember his website has that whimsical font. And I'm like, what is this? And you take a course, and I took my first vacation series with John teaching. And there is something about how he masterfully uses energy to curate the best parts of his courses and teaches that on a deeper level, on a spirit level, I would say. And I guess you took to it. I don't know that you took it to it quickly. You said you had some fears around it. I think everyone has fears around it, this imposter syndrome. And something that John has echoed, and I do firmly believe, is anyone can do this work. It's just that a lot of times we'll feel insecure, like we're not enough or we're not good enough, or who's to say that we're able to do this. But that is channel 5 fear saying, hey,
Mhm.
you can't do this. And it took something like your spirit to say, hey, this is it for you. Hey, quit your job. Now, on that note, how does your spirit talk to you? Because let's say you're someone
Mm.
like me who is pretty much living in a Channel 5 world and has now stepped into Channel 3, and being guided by your spirit or your intuition doesn't come as naturally to me. Can you
Mhm.
explain to me and the audience what your spirit sounds like, and how does your spirit speak to you?
So, in the two specific examples that I just told you about, when I was sitting in class and then when I was sitting on the couch watching television and it was like, quit your job, I would say those are unique, where it's like a sentence format, like, I actually hear it. It's like it's like someone standing there saying, quit your job. It's as real as your voice. So that has happened to me multiple times, but it's much more rare than just it's kind of hard to explain. It's more of a knowing, like an intuition, like a guidance, but it's undeniable. It's not subtle. It's not like a whisper of a maybe. It's like it's a full-on knowing. Like this is what you need to do. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
It does, and then is it your voice or is it a different voice that you hear, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no problem. So the thing that happens more frequently, like with that knowing, there's no voice. So it's not
Okay.
like a telling and then a hearing. It's just a feeling, a knowing. When I hear the voice, I've never thought about it. What a great question. I don't think it's my voice, but it's just a voice. I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know how to answer that, but I think that what's important to say about the knowing or the intuition or the messages from the higher self is the more you listen to them. So when you get that intuition and you hear it, if you follow it, you will be rewarded with increased intuition.
Mm.
If you don't follow it, it can be more shut down or more difficult to connect to. But I feel like every time I listen to it and I honor it, then I'm more attuned to it, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I think what you are describing is something that John refers to as your feeling intelligence. I think
Yes.
through our whole lives, we get told what to do, and we're constantly thinking about what we need to do and processing it from a more linear, logical side. And we'll say, hey, based on these facts, we should make the best decision based on that. Versus
Right.
what John has taught us is there's a feeling intelligence that's more subtle at times. Sometimes it could be loud, but it's available to all of us. And it's this inner wisdom that we all have. Some people call it
Hmm.
the Akashic records, some people call it different things. but it's this universal wisdom that we all have the ability to tap into. But I think through schooling or society or culturally,
Yes.
we unlearn that. And yes, I agree that this spirit that you speak of is your higher self. And so
Hmm.
I've had experiences where I will hear this prayer in a sense, and it's my voice, but it's not me saying it. And so that's where I think or I feel that it's my higher self speaking through me.
Hmm.
And to your credit, if you act on what you are being guided towards, then that's almost like your higher self saying, "Hey, you're taking action towards the things that I'm guiding you towards, so you will receive more guidance." But if
Right.
you hear it and then you're like, "Okay, I don't know what that was. I'm just going to do my normal monotonous day-to-day things," then you're going to get less of those messages. And
Hmm.
it can be very tough to listen because oftentimes it goes against what is making sense logically. And that's
Hmm.
where you have to have trust and faith that it is guiding you towards your highest good, what is best for things that you can't comprehend in that moment. Now, with you specifically, you were told to quit your job. And I think that
Hmm.
is a very big step. Obviously, we have to have certain finances for basic things, food,
Right.
rent, clothes, things like that. How are you able to just trust this message that you got to the point where you quit your job and started your own thing? Because I think that takes a lot of courage. And I don't know that that's necessarily how you are talking about it in that sense.
True. So it was more gradual than that. After I started taking the classes, I reduced my hours pretty quickly after that from 40 to 30, and I officially opened a practice. Now, that being said, I wasn't like advertising or marketing or anything like that, but I decided I was going to be open to taking MFR clients after work. So I dropped my hours to 30, and it's like if you build it they will come. So, and because I was in management, I had a lot of flexibility so far as my schedule. I had to work 6 hours a day, but if someone booked a session with me at 10 a.m., so long as I didn't have any corporate meetings or anything to attend, I could actually leave the place I worked. I could do the MFR treatment, and then I could go back to work. So I did that for about 2 years, and I was like right on the precipice where I was like, okay, I'm making enough money doing MFR after work. I see the potential financially. And it really just required me taking that leap of faith. Like, because my regular job was safety and security. Like I knew every 2 weeks I was going to get that paycheck, right? And so that I think that it's not like I just went cold turkey. I had started to take clients, and I was kind of at a point where I would have to turn people away because I can't see that many people after I've already worked a full day at a regular job. And so I'd be like, oh, well, I was booked out. And so I think it was my spirit saying, like, it's time. The time is now. It's now. Let go of this soul sucking corporate rehab job and fly on the wings of MFR. You are free. You are free.
What a feeling. What a feeling to feel free. I think
Yes.
a lot of times people will start businesses for different reasons. And I think freedom is a huge driver. Not to feel like you are at this soul sucking job that you have to do. I would call it like
Hmm.
modern day slavery. It's
It
like
is.
you are succumbing to these pressures of society or bills and things like that. And then you do something that kills your soul. And you just keep
Does.
doing that because you can convince yourself, hey, this is what I have to do. This is what I should be doing.
Hmm.
And it takes courage, I think. And then we've also had the experience of myofascial release to say, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. And
Right.
what I love about your story is even though you say it like, hey, my spirit told me to quit, you did it gradually. It's not like this, hey, I feel this thing, I've been told this thing, and I need to quit everything and go at it full time. And I think
Hmm.
there's nothing courageous about making your family suffer because you feel strongly called to do something else, you know? And so in your specific example, you said, hey, I was able to reduce my hours from 40 to
Mhm.
30, which is still a lot of work. But by doing so, you gave yourself this ability to start a side hustle. And you said, hey,
Mhm.
I'm going to see patients and clients on the side. And slowly that started to grow, you know, and gradually, once you could see it, once you could see and envision this, you know, this is working. And if I see more patients eventually, I don't have to stay at this job. And I think your spirit guided you in saying, hey, now's the time to quit because you're miserable over here. You can see
Yes.
that there's a path to freedom on this other side, and you've been doing it, you know, and I think starting is one of the hardest things to do because we have those fears, those channel 5 traits that tell us, hey, it's not going to work out because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever you think you're telling yourself is going to happen. And that's true because where awareness goes, energy flows. And so if you don't think it's
Yes.
going to work out, guess what? It's not going to work out. But if you feel like it can work out and you start to see and envision that, then you'll take the steps towards that. But it's not going to happen just because you think it. It takes action, and that's what you've taken. And so for anyone listening to this, it's very much that. If you feel called to do this work and you feel like you're going to do it to help others, then guess what? You have the opportunity to experience this freedom where, hey, you wake up to doing something that you love. You know, we're shooting this podcast on a Monday, and I love Mondays. That's when I get to start my work week. Whereas when I was working for someone else and feeling a little bit imprisoned, I was
Yeah.
like, dude, Monday's coming. You know, like I'm barely gotten to recover from the weekend, and here we go again.
Yeah.
How would you encourage someone who has thought those things or is in the process of that, of like, let's say for you're an occupational therapist. So let's say
Mhm.
occupational therapist where, you know, they're working with patients and insurance is dictating them, but everyone around them is saying, hey, this is what you signed up for. This is what it means to
Right.
be an occupational therapist. And they're like, hey, I have these student loans I have to repay. I am scared to take this next step with MFR. What would you say?
Yes. Well, firstly, a quote came to my mind when you were talking about how important your belief systems are in your success or failure. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time, and it's Henry Ford. And he says, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you are right. So I think that that is really important. And that goes to say exactly, to your point, exactly what you said. So, as far as what I would say to anyone who is, thinking about getting into this work, as a therapist, you spend so much time documenting. Like, I think that that's probably the worst part of the job is how much time you spend documenting. I don't take insurance. I have a cash only practice. I do no documentation, none. So I'm completely liberated. If that doesn't make a therapist want to do this work, I don't know what would. So, what I do is I actually put the burden of responsibility on my clients. So, let's say it's towards the end of a therapy session, and all of a sudden I have an awareness like, okay, their right piriformis needs work the next time they come in, or I'm feeling something out of alignment, but there's only 5 minutes left in the session. I want to stick with what I've started with. When they come out, I will actually tell them to write it in their phone notes. I'll be like, hey, when you come back next week, can you just say the words left shoulder to me and I'll remember it. So that's what I do as far as documentation. And then obviously, I have a cash practice. So I make more than 3 times an hour money wise than what I made in corporate rehab. So, I mean, that's a huge incentive, a huge incentive. And even when I raise my prices, people don't, they still come because the work is so amazing. And that would be my final point so far as incentive for starting a private practice is that it works. So, when you're in corporate rehab, you're in this therapy, I don't even know what you want to call it, like a therapy factory where you're following protocol. It doesn't matter if you're 80 or if you're 25, a shoulder is a shoulder, a knee is a knee. This is the protocol that we follow. And let's be honest, sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't work. And what I do works. So if you're a therapist because you really want to help people have increased independence, and more rich, fulfilling lives, you have a technique at your disposal that does exactly that. So, I mean, that is hugely rewarding. And I would tell you, probably 75% of my clients, they'll come to me with an issue. I work on the issue is resolved, and they still keep coming to me. They no longer have the shoulder pain or the migraines, but they love the technique so much that they're like, I can't imagine not being on your table.
I love that. And I could tell that the way you speak about it is you're an MFR junkie. I think we have these
Get my shirt.
questions. Yeah, well, yeah, I got the hat, she's got the shirt. And it's because I think a lot of times in the beginning, you don't identify with being a myofascial release therapist. And because you don't identify with it, it's harder for you to grasp onto the work. And it's okay. I think all of us start there at some capacity, and then it's not a race. I think comparison is the thief of joy. And once you
Yes.
start comparing yourself to other people of like, oh, Elizabeth picked it up super fast, I'm not picking it up as fast. That is a channel 5 trait. Versus if
Right.
we could be in channel 3 and say, hey, I'm here because I feel called to do this and I know it can help people. And that's genuinely where that starts, that compassion. Then you'd be amazed at what can happen. And
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying because I'm not an occupational therapist, but I'm a physical therapist. And we have very similar dynamics where I call them PT mills. It's like seeing
Yes.
3 to 4 different patients at the same time. You're
Yes.
just churning through it. Nothing feels alive. It's just kind of like you're
Mm-mm.
just following these protocols. But something that I believe and that John echoes is there are 7 billion people in the world. And how can you have a cookie cutter protocol that treats them all the same? And so
Right.
something that he'll show us in our seminars is this splatter art. And what he's trying to show with that is even though someone might have the same diagnosis of low back pain, it could be very different things. It can come from physical things, emotional things, a combination of the both. But it's
Mm-hmm.
you as a therapist who is the artist who can uncover and peel back those layers that allows them to heal versus just saying,
Yeah.
oh, hey, you got low back pain. This is our low back pain protocol. And you're just going to
Exactly.
follow it. Right. And so
Right.
with that, we honor who they are as a human being. We're not treating them as just their specific body parts. And how, of course, is that going to be very different? Because they're going to say, oh, this person understands me. This person actually touched me where it hurts versus just
Yes.
getting an x-ray, an MRI, and then saying, hey, because we see this on the imaging, it means that. Or worse, when they don't see anything on the imaging, then they're lost in their recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that is where it starts. You feeling like, hey, this can work. And then as you build confidence with your patient results, that kind of keeps the momentum going. And then for you, you've also said, hey, I make way more than I did as an occupational therapist in a traditional setting. And
Mm-hmm.
finances do play a role because obviously, if we're all broke and poor being an MFR therapist, no one would want to do that. But the possibility is there, right? And that doesn't mean that you didn't have to do the work that you had to do, but at least being aware that, hey, it's possible for me to sustain myself, to provide for my family through doing this modality that didn't exist until after I, graduated from OT school and learned about this work. And so that is a message that I'm trying to spread, right? Like
Yes.
it is a possibility for you to live a life of freedom where your career supports your life instead of your life supporting your career. And I think the
Preach.
roles in which you engage with that are very crucial. You're choosing a life of happiness and fulfillment. You're not
Yeah.
just succumbing to the pressures and saying, hey, this is what I have to do. Now, with the
Totally.
life of freedom, and this is a journey that I'm on as well, where it's you just want to be able to take care of yourself, your family, and do things that give you fulfillment. How have you been guided beyond myofascial release? Because when I see your pictures, I travel a lot, and I think that's amazing. And I know
Right.
that when I was working in a traditional setting, that would have been impossible. You got to take PTO or request time off, and you kind of lose out on these experiences. How has your MFR practice allowed you to live a life of freedom and fulfillment?
Wow, it's so like there's so many levels because there's a version of me on this timeline that would not have had the courage, even if I had the capacity so far as available time off and finances and all of those things, I still wouldn't have had the courage to do the things that I do now, now that I am experiencing freedom every day. So Channel 5 answer to the question is because I have my own practice, I can set my own schedule. So I have so much freedom to go explore the world and do the things that I want to do. And my clients almost unanimously say when I come back, yes, they're sometimes frustrated that when I leave, they're missing a week or they're missing 2 weeks of therapy or something like that. But they all say when you come back, like your powers are increased. But they love it. They love that first session when I come back. And I will refer out while I'm gone. So there's some other therapists in the area where I live. And so they'll treat my clients, if it's somebody who's in more of an acute situation. But yeah, just owning my own business, having my own practice has given me the freedom. Then on a deeper level, just being in the flow, realizing that really anything is possible and any limits that are out there are just belief systems that I have in place. And so I love to challenge those belief systems. And every time, just like with trusting your intuition, it's like every time I go outside of my comfort zone, I expand, I learn. I'm a consummate learner. I am most happy when I am exploring and when I'm learning. And for me, travel is my favorite way to learn. I love to experience other cultures and see new sights. I feel super, super fulfilled when I do that. And the first time I did that, I was terrified. Like to leave my country by myself, like so many things could potentially go wrong and everything went right. And so then that gave me more courage to like try it a little more and try it a little more. And I'm wearing a bracelet right now that says fearless. And like I try to embody that. Like I don't even know who this like the past version of me, if she saw me right now, she would be like, "Who are you?" Because I just like I want to share a story with you. So I spent February in Thailand. And one night, I don't know if you've been to Thailand, but they're crazy for drinks, like smoothies and coffees and specialties. Like you could go to a place in Thailand and they might have 40 drinks on the menu, non-alcoholic. And I had this terrible craving for a passion fruit smoothie.
Mm.
So this is like 10 o'clock at night. So delicious, right? So I go out and I get this passion fruit smoothie on my scooter. And on the way back, I was staying in a little jungle hut. So on the way back, it's a big full moon. I'm under the full moon. I'm driving through a jungle on a scooter that I've rented for $6 with a passion fruit smoothie swinging from my wrist in a little bag. And I'm like, who am I? I'm a 52-year-old woman driving through the jungle on a scooter with a passion fruit smoothie. And I was just like, my spirit was like patting me on the back, like, you are free. You are free. You are free. Like, this is life. This is real life. The PT mill is not real life. This is real life, and it's been such an amazing journey. I literally feel like I get this visualization that John opened my cage and let me free. Like I'm a bird and John Barnes opened the cage and he let me free. And then I hear John in his John voice with his arms folded across his chest going, "The truth is, Elizabeth, the cage was never even really there."
Yes, yes. I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing it. I have not yet had a chance to go to Thailand, but a place that has been on my radar is Angkor Wat, which is like a temple out there. And
Mhm.
I just love that you had this awareness that you're driving through on the scooter in the jungle with your passion fruit, and you had this down of like, this is life. This is real life.
Yes.
It's not about doing things that you say you have to do, or I should be doing this, or society is telling me this. And that
Mhm.
is the figurative cage that we all put ourselves in, you know? And I love the visualization that you said, oh, and I have this visualization of John saying, hey, you're free. And by the way, that cage was never really there. It's the cages that we put on ourselves, and that's all it is. And if you can challenge your belief systems and embrace that, you can live a life of total freedom and fulfillment.
Mhm.
You have to be willing to take that step. I love that story, and it gives me more motivation to visit Thailand. I have a brother in Vietnam, and he says Thailand is one of his favorite places to go. And I think after you sharing that story, I'm gonna put it on my to visit list. And
Yes, I did top to bottom. So it's amazing, amazing country.
I'll check it out. Now, I think a lot of people have fears about traveling solo, and I would say specifically women more so because I
Hmm.
think there's more fears around safety. And
Hmm.
I'll say for myself, I remember most of my life I had traveled, whether with friends or with family, and I always had people around me that I felt safe with. And my first trip solo was actually taking a vacation series, MFR vacation series in Key West, Florida. And so I went by myself, and I think there's something about traveling by yourself that allows you to feel more enriched, these
Hmm.
fears that you have that you engaged with. Whereas for me, I think because you're solo, you can do things at your own pace. And I've
Hmm.
met people that I've become lifelong friends with. I obviously learned a lot of more about myofascial release and then release things. And then, yes, you come back feeling different because you are not aware of the subconscious patterns that you put yourself into, and it takes something to disrupt your day-to-day life to say, oh man, I don't have to be doing all these things or thinking these ways. How would you recommend someone take a solo trip if they're just deathly afraid of traveling by themselves?
Ooh, deathly afraid. I mean, I was afraid, no doubt. So I would do something closer to home. So maybe not international, but maybe go to a national park or something like that by yourself initially. I didn't do that. I went to Costa Rica for 7 days by myself. I
Love
was
it.
terrified. Like I think I was having a panic attack in customs. For some reason, I was fine on the airplane, but then when the plane landed in Costa Rica and I disembarked and I was standing in the line to go through customs, like I could not get, like my heart rate was beating out of my chest, my hips were sweaty. Like I was like, what am I doing? But I just did it. I just did it. And it was so amazing. But I think someone who's scared to death, maybe if you tried something locally, and every time you do something and then it's a success, it gets a little addictive because you're like, okay, that was really nice. I could hike as far as I wanted to hike or as not far as I wanted. You really get to kind of do what you want to, do what you want, what's important to you on the trip. And as far as safety goes, I have always felt safe. I think that the people in the world are good and that everyone is just living their lives with their families. I mean, yes, I'm sure there are some bad people, but predominantly everybody that I experience is amazing. And because I feel like I'm in the flow, I feel like the universe is like setting amazing people in front of me, like everywhere I go. If I'm lost, like for example, one morning I was in Spain when this happened to me. It was one of my caminos, and I like to start really really early, so it's still dark. It's like 5:30 in the morning. Nobody's around. I'm the only one, just me and my backpack, deep in thought, just walking down the street. And this guy comes out of his house to with his dog to let his dog go to the bathroom. So what's the odds that I'd be walking by exactly as this guy comes out of his house with his dog on a leash? And he looks at me and he goes, Camino. And I was like, see. And he goes, that way. I had gone the wrong way, but the universe had just supernaturally put this random stranger in my path that turned me around and sent me in the right direction. So I think I assume that everything is working out in divine timing for my benefit And then that's just how it is. So, I mean, I feel like there was one time when some guy was like making me feel uncomfortable. And so I just popped into a bakery really quickly. And to be fair, I probably shouldn't have been. It was in India, and I was out walking by myself at like 10 o'clock at night. So I think you can maybe make wiser decisions. But in general, I've always felt safe. I've always felt safe.
I love that. There's a quote. I don't necessarily remember exactly who said it, and I might be butchering the words a little bit, but it's you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. And
Right.
so for you, and I would share in this, it's like I believe that people are good. So I see the
Yes.
good in people. But I know people who have a negative lens of the world. And so guess what? They're only going to see this negativity, you know?
Hmm.
And so I think where you have also honored that is saying, hey, I can travel and do these things and trust that I'll be taken care of. Now, that
Right.
doesn't come with blind faith. Obviously, if you're feeling uncomfortable or you're getting the heebie-jeebies, you're going to do
Hmm.
things like, oh, I'm going to pop into this bakery. You know, it's not to say
Hmm.
like, hey, you're just all of a sudden like this free flying, skydiving, like no parachute, and things are going to work out. It's, hey,
Yeah.
I do feel like I will be taken care of, and I'll take those steps. And then if you feel anything else, you can always take those parameters into account.
Yeah.
So I love that. Now, you had mentioned what is it, the Camino de Santiago?
Yeah.
And from my understanding, that's like a pilgrimage. Can you elaborate on your experience?
So the first Camino that I walked was in 2022. I was terrified, so scared of like 1,000 things. I mean, from bed bugs to like falling off a mountain and breaking my leg to will I be able to find a room to sleep in? Like you name it. I mean, I was terrified in every way, but I pushed myself to do it. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. So I walked from the border of France. I actually started in Saint Jean Pied de Port in France, and then I trekked across the Pyrenees mountain range, and then all the way through Spain from east to west to the Atlantic Ocean. So it's 500 miles to get to
Wow.
Santiago to Compostela. And they say, and correctly, through my experience, that the first third of the Camino is physical. So you've got blisters and shin splints, and your Achilles is yelling at you, and your shoulders hurt, and your lower back from carrying your pack because you carry everything on your back. So it's like really a physical game. It's like every morning when you wake up and you take that first step, your body is like, don't, you need to quit. And then it's like a head game because you're like, well, I could quit. I've done 200 miles. That's pretty good or whatever. You start to play head games with yourself. So once you push through the pain of the physical body, then the middle part is more of a head game. So the middle part is the plains of Spain. So you don't have a lot of diversity as far as view. There's not a lot of distraction because you don't have to balance going up and down mountains or, whatever. It's just kind of flat. It's like walking through Nebraska or something like that. It's really kind of boring as far as that goes. So what you're left with, and your body's kind of used to it, so it's not screaming at you anymore. So what you're left with is you on top of you on top of you. So all of those thoughts in your mind that you try to push out, they're all just coming out like, hey, we're going to play with you today. And your mind is kind of like, I don't even know if I'm doing a good job describing it, but it's like all of your demons come out of the box. Like every thought from your childhood or every trauma, everything that you don't want to deal with, they're like, today is the day. So you're equally exhausted by the time your head hits the pillow because you've been like in mental, like, oh my goodness, all day long. And so then the third part they say is spiritual. So at this point, your body is like, okay, we're walking 20 miles every day for the rest of our life. And your head is like, we give up. We're not thinking about anything anymore. You're just walking in this meditative state and amazing things happen to you, like transcendence. You're going to think I'm bonkers, but like I've actually spent hours where I'm walking as a pillar of light. So this form, this physicality, this body I lose perception of it. I'm literally just walking like my molecules are light molecules, and it's oneness with all of creation. It's connectedness to everything. It's just receiving these amazing energies and downloads from source energy. It's purifying you, electrifying you, healing you, inspiring you. Like, it's just the most amazing transcendent experience. So by the time you get to the end of the 500 miles, like, you are not the same person. You are entirely different. So I've done the French route in 2 years. I've done the French route twice. And then one time I walked from Porto, Portugal to Santiago de Compostela. It's significantly shorter. I think it's like 178 miles.
It's still a distance, but I'm like, dude, I walked we hiked like 12 miles and I was like, dude, my back is killing me right now. So I couldn't imagine these huge pilgrimages. But I
Yeah,
think what I love about your story is it's a journey, right? It
it
starts
is.
physical, and many of us are kind of stuck in this physical plane. And then it moves into your mental. And it's these deeper things that are in your subconscious that you said, like they're
Mhm.
like, yo, some of your traumas get revealed. You start thinking about your childhood and things like that. And it is coming out, right? And then once you get past those, then you feel this spiritual last third of it. And I don't think you're crazy. It's funny that you said there's a version of you that would laugh at who you are today. And I am resonated with that. And there's a version of myself that would laugh at me at the things that I'm doing or saying today. But the person I am today is much more wiser. And once you shed this fear of judgment, then
Mhm.
you can actually live. You can live without that fear. And yes, something that John says and that you've echoed in your story is we are light beings. This physical body is here, it's real, but there's so much more beyond that. There's an energetic body, a light body. And the only thing that separates these things are the words that we use. But we're
Mhm.
all this encompassing universe in the body and outside. So as above, so below. And once you start looking at things through those lenses, then you start recognizing the patterns. And it's like you can now engage through life and feel amazing. I think something that John says that I would say we both agree with is the purpose of life is to enjoy your life. And once you
Yes.
follow that joy, it's very easy to trust it more and more, and joy is different than happiness. I think happiness is a product of your circumstances, whereas joy is like an innate feeling that you get when something just
Mhm.
lights you up. And so you're in good company. I think as I've gotten to know you in the MFR circles, there are things that I was questioning, but as I've just shed my own judgments and my fear of judgments, that I've been able to kind of walk alongside you and be able to get the doors open to the good life. And so I am in a chapter of my life where I'm trying to develop my own relationship with God, and your Camino de Santiago pilgrimages definitely inspired me to embark on that. How have you integrated the lessons that you've learned from this pilgrimage into your everyday life? Because I think something that can happen is, whether it's your hikes with the Caminos or MFR seminars, it's like we go to these spaces, the veil gets taken off and we see what could be and we feel this joy, and then you return to your life and you're like, ah, man, I got all these responsibilities and obligations, and you forget that this other thing exists. How do you go about integrating?
So I'm not going to lie, it is kind of hard to come back into this container. When you have experienced this massive, like, I mean, I feel like when I'm on the Camino, I've got wings on my back, and I have a massive wingspan, and they're completely outstretched and I'm flying free. But then you have to sort of, to some degree, conform to society, to live in this house, in this city. And I'm a mother and I'm a wife and things like that. You have to fit into those roles. My clients are depending on me. So in some way you have to come back into a smaller container than just being wide open and free. So that is a little bit challenging initially. But I think that as far as integration, the biggest lessons that the Camino in particular have provided me with is trust, is trust. And so like the Camino that I just finished 6 weeks ago, like some pilgrims, they don't book any rooms at all. And it's really popular right now. So there is a huge potential that you're not going to have a place to sleep. But I just trust that everything is going to work out for me. It might not be the way I would have figured for it to work out, but everything is going to work out nevertheless, right? So just trusting that it's going to be okay. I don't know how this is going to be accomplished, but I trust that it's going to be accomplished in the best possible way. So that's sort of what my takeaway has been from the Camino, is to trust. And then I also love that, I might mess this up a bit, but John gives he gives this metaphor of like a helicopter, where when a helicopter, it has a potential to go in any of these directions. If you were to make lines out of a circle, right, you can go, but once you engage in a certain direction, the helicopter can only go in that direction. And I don't know why that story hit me so hard, but I remember it all the time, because I think if I'm being stubborn or headstrong, like this is the way I want it to be, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, I have then eliminated all of these other potential ways for the same goal to be achieved. Or maybe even that's not the right goal. Maybe something else is better. And I'm not considering it because I've got tunnel vision on this one thing. And so I feel like the Camino has really highlighted that for me. Like, just be free, be in the flow, trust that everything is going to work out, and let go. And when you let go, great things happen. Holding on is hard. It seems like letting go is hard, right? When you're on the other side. But from where I sit right now, I realize letting go is easier than it is holding on. Holding on is freaking exhausting. You'll kill yourself holding on. How much energy does it take to hold on? It takes a massive amount of energy to hold on. But to let go, all it requires is trust. And for me at this point in my life, it's a lot easier to just trust.
I love that. I think something that John says is the ultimate form of control is being able to let go of control. And it's exactly that. The helicopter analogy that you described is about being centered. Instead of when you are trying to force things or saying, hey, this is the way it
Mhm,
has to be, when you are centered. And the helicopter analogy that John says is once it's centered, it has the possibility to move in any
mhm,
direction that it wants. But once it starts going, then it's going in that direction. And for us as therapists, he encourages us and teaches us to be centered and present, and not to
mhm,
project this future that has not happened yet, not to live in this past and let that weigh us down. And yes, you, I think, have done some inner work that allows you to let go more easily. Maybe it's just your personality type. Whereas some people are so scared to let go of control because of this uncertainty. And what you will learn through experience is once you let go of control, then you give your intuition or your spirits or your higher self the opportunity to guide you. And it
mhm,
is scary in the beginning because obviously you don't
mhm.
know. But through repetition and experience, you will learn that, hey, it's all going to work out, and you're
Right.
able to have this feeling of trust. I think when you say, like, I've learned to trust, there's one thing in saying those words like, oh, I'm going to trust it's going to work out. I'm going to trust it's going to work out. But you don't feel that way. And it's once you
Mm-mm.
feel that way that it actually plays out in that manner. So I love that you
Mhm,
said that. And that's definitely something that I'm learning to do more and more. Sometimes it gets hard, especially when there's obstacles or challenges. Whereas I think sometimes I am guilty of saying to myself, like, oh man, it's too much friction over here. There's an obstacle in this way or these challenges, and that must mean it's not the way I'm supposed to go. Whereas
mhm,
now I've learned to say, hey, this obstacle is in my way for a reason. What am I going to learn from it? And whether that's learning to trust or learning to be more persistent and finding that balance of When is it supposed to be when you're supposed to work through these things, and when are you supposed to let go? And I think the easiest way to make that decision is not try to think about it yourself. It's to be
Mhm.
centered and allow your intuition to guide you. So,
Yeah.
and to feel it, you got it. The
Yeah.
feeling intelligence. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your stories. I think it's a reminder of, hey, life is meant to be enjoyed. And so if you are always in a place of solving problems or figuring things out, you're going to miss out on this very important essence, to feel joy in things. How do people find you?
Well, they can find me on Facebook. They can look me up there. I'm in Charlotte. So if you just Google Myofascial Release in Charlotte, you're going to see my face. My practice is called Alternative Therapy Charlotte.
Love it. And is there any last thing you would like to share with my audience before we head out?
Just, I think one thing based on what you said something about maybe it just comes naturally to my personality. I spent my entire life until I found myofascial release being super, super control freak, OCD. My employees used to mess with me by like tipping a piece of paper off center so it'd be just like out of alignment, or they'd take a pin from from the pin pile and put it in the pencil pile. Like, I was a super control freak. When we would go on family vacations, I had a 3-ring binder with the itinerary for each day and a plastic sleeve with directions of what we were going to do and the money that I needed for that day in an envelope. I had every part of my life planned to the most minute detail. After my MFR journey, I am on the exact opposite side of the coin. I no longer really plan anything, and it all works out.
Love it. Thank you so much. I think that's a reminder for all of us who are those planners or those control freaks. You just got to let go of control, and you'd be
Let it go.
amazed at what comes from it.
Yes, it has been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.